So there I was, standing at the entrance of what looked like the answer to all my post-apocalyptic prayers, an abandoned underground shelter, the kind of place that whispers promises of safety, shelter, and maybe, just maybe, a working toilet. Spoiler alert, there was no toilet. But before we get too excited about any shelter we stumble across in the wasteland, we need to talk about something crucial: evaluation. Because here's the thing, finding a shelter is only half the battle. The other half is making sure that shelter doesn't become your tomb. Dramatic? Maybe accurate. Absolutely. You see, this place may look safe, the entrance is intact, there's no immediate smell of death, and the walls aren't actively crumbling. But sometimes, and I cannot stress this enough, safe is a suggestion, not a guarantee. That beautiful underground bunker could have structural issues, air quality problems, or, let's be honest, things living in it that really don't want roommates. Today, I'm going to walk you through how to properly evaluate an abandoned shelter. We're talking stability checks, airflow inspection, structural integrity assessment, and how to secure your new digs without becoming a cautionary tale. So grab your imaginary flashlight and let's dive into the art of not dying in your sleep, because you picked a shelter held together by optimism and rust. First things first, before you start moving in your collection of scavenged teddy bears and canned beans, you need to assess whether the ground beneath your feet is actually going to stay beneath your feet. Start with a visual inspection. I'm talking about looking at everything: the floor, the ceiling, the walls. Treat this place like it's judging you, because trust me, if there are cracks, they're definitely judging you. Look for fissures that seem suspiciously organized, like they've been planning a meeting without you. Hairline cracks? Probably fine. Cracks wide enough to fit your finger? That's the ground telling you it has commitment issues. Pay special attention to the ceiling. See those loose chunks of concrete hanging up there like stalactites of doom? Yeah, those are what I call ceiling confetti, and you don't want to be around when they decide to celebrate. If you see rubble that looks like it's one sneeze away from rebellion, mark that area as a no-go zone. Now, here's a pro tip that saved my life at least 3 times. Always check your footing before committing to an area. And I mean really check it. Do a little test walk. Bounce gently. Does the floor make sounds that suggest it's auditioning for a horror movie? Does it feel spongy, like you're walking on a very firm mattress made of lies? That's your cue to back away slowly. I once stepped into a tunnel that looked perfectly solid. Concrete floor, minimal debris, great ambience. Took 3 steps and heard a crack that sounded exactly like the ground saying, "We need to talk." Turns out, there was a hollow space underneath. Did I mention I can now jump backwards 6 feet from a standing position? New skill unlocked. Look for water damage too. If the floor has that fun, mottled appearance where it's clear water has been having parties down here, that's erosion. And erosion means weakness. It means the ground has been slowly eaten away by moisture, and it's only a matter of time before it decides to introduce you to the floor below, which in my experience is never as fun as it sounds. Alright, so the ground isn't actively trying to kill you. Excellent start. Now let's talk about something you probably take for granted: breathing, specifically breathable air. Because here's a fun fact about enclosed underground spaces. Sometimes the air gets weird. Now, I'm not saying you need to be an atmospheric scientist here, but you do need to develop what I call the wasteland sniff test. Take a deep breath through your nose at the entrance. What do you smell? If the answer is nothing, or maybe a bit of dust and old concrete, great. If the answer is sulfur, rot, or what I can only describe as angry chemicals, maybe reconsider your real estate choices. But don't just rely on your nose. Air quality isn't just about smell. You need to check circulation. Find any vents, grates, or openings. Take a piece of paper, a leaf, or even a strand of your increasingly wild hair and hold it near the opening. Does it move? Congratulations, you have airflow. Does it just hang there like it's given up on life? That's stagnant air, my friend, and stagnant air is not your friend. I like to get a little dramatic with this test. I'll tear off a corner of an old map and hold it up near different vents, watching it flutter like I'm some kind of post-apocalyptic wind whisperer. Am I overthinking air currents? Absolutely. Has it kept me alive? Also, absolutely. Here's where it gets fun or terrifying, mostly terrifying. Listen to the air. I know that sounds ridiculous, but bear with me. Move through the space and pay attention to echoing sounds. If you hear your footsteps echo back at you with perfect clarity, that might mean the air is thick and still. Good airflow tends to absorb sound a bit differently. It's subtle, but once you know what to listen for, you'll notice. And watch out for overly dramatic drafts. You know the kind I mean. You're walking along, everything's fine, and suddenly there's a gust of wind that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, like the shelter itself is sighing. That's not mysterious. That's not the spirits of the wasteland. That's a pressure differential, and it usually means there's an opening somewhere that's letting in outside air. Could be good for ventilation. Could also be structural damage. Mark it, investigate it, but don't ignore it. Oh, and if you start feeling dizzy, lightheaded, or like the walls are moving in ways walls shouldn't move, get out immediately. That's not a ghost. That's bad air. Carbon dioxide buildup, lack of oxygen, or worse. Your brain needs oxygen more than it needs a cool underground shelter. Trust me on this. Now we get to the fun part. And by fun, I mean the part where we figure out if this shelter is going to last the night or collapse on us like a disappointed souffle. Structural integrity is all about three things: tapping, listening, and observing. Think of yourself as a very anxious woodpecker, but for concrete and metal. Let's start with the walls. Walk along them and tap gently with your knuckles. Solid walls should sound well solid, a nice dull thud. If you hear a hollow sound, like you're knocking on a drum, that's bad news. That's either a void behind the wall or a section that's separated from the rest of the structure. Either way, it's weak, and weak walls have a tendency to become former walls. Cracks are your next obsession. Not all cracks are created equal. Vertical cracks, usually not great, but not immediately catastrophic. Horizontal cracks, those are the walls telling you they're under stress. Diagonal cracks that run from floor to ceiling, that's the wall's resignation letter. It's done. It's checking out. I once found this beautiful shelter, perfect size, relatively dry, and I was about 2 seconds from declaring it home sweet home when I noticed a crack running diagonally across the back wall. At first, I thought, hey, it's fine. It's not that wide. Then I looked closer and realized I could see the crack widening as I watched, like actively moving. Turns out, the wall was in the middle of a very slow-motion collapse. I have never packed up my stuff faster in my life. Now, let's talk about ceilings, because ceilings are where physics gets really excited about killing you. Look for loose beams. If you see wooden supports, check for rot, warping, or splitting. Metal beams should be examined for rust, especially at the joints. Any beam that looks like it's bowing or sagging is a beam that's saying goodbye. Here's my favorite test, and yes, it's slightly terrifying. Find a loose piece of rubble, nothing too big, just a small chunk. Toss it gently at different sections of the ceiling. Not hard, we're not trying to bring the place down ourselves. Just a little tap. Listen to the sound it makes. Solid. Good. Does it dislodge a shower of dust and debris? Less good. Does it cause a small avalanche of concrete to rain down? Congratulations, you just identified a problem area. Speaking of rubble, I learned this lesson the hard way. I was checking out a tunnel section. Everything looked fine, and I leaned against what I thought was a stable pile of debris. It wasn't stable. It tipped over like it had been waiting its entire existence for this moment, sent rocks tumbling everywhere, and scared me so badly I think I left my soul 3 feet behind me. No real harm done, but lesson learned. Loose rubble is loose for a reason. Watch the corners where walls meet walls and where walls meet ceilings. Those joints are under the most stress, and they're usually where problems show up first. If you see crumbling mortar, gaps, or shifting, take notes. Mental or actual, your choice. All right, you've found a shelter that's not actively trying to murder you. Time to make it yours. And by yours, I mean secured, defensible, and arranged in a way that says, I live here now, and I've thought about the logistics. First priority, dealing with unstable entrances. If there's a doorway or opening that looks questionable, don't trust it. Instead, gather scrap materials, boards, sheets of metal, even large pieces of cardboard, if that's all you've got. Prop them against weak sections to reinforce them. It won't win any engineering awards, but it'll buy you time if something decides to collapse. I like to use the rubble that's already in the shelter, that loose pile of bricks you marked as dangerous earlier. Congratulations, it's now construction material. Stack it strategically to block off unstable side passages or to create barriers. Just make sure you're stacking it against something solid, not creating a new avalanche waiting to happen. Now here's where you get creative with observation points. Find crates, boxes, or even sturdy debris and arrange them to create elevated positions. Not only does this give you a better view of your surroundings, but it also keeps you off potentially damp or cold floors. Plus, and this is crucial, being on higher ground means you're not at floor level if something decides to scurry through. Spiders don't climb as much as you'd think, probably. Let's talk about perimeter awareness. You need to know if something or someone is approaching. This is where your inner MacGyver comes out. Take old cans, bottles, or any metal objects that make noise. String them up with whatever you can find, wire, rope, strips of fabricand. Arrange them near entrances or in dark corners. It's a DIY alarm system. Is it sophisticated? No. Does it work? Surprisingly well. I once set up a beautiful tripwire system using cans and some ancient fishing line I found. Worked perfectly. Too perfectly. I forgot about it on day 3, got up in the middle of the night, and triggered my own alarm. The noise was spectacular. I nearly jumped through the ceiling. The ceiling, thankfully, did not jump with me. But I never forgot where that tripwire was again. Create zones in your shelter. Sleeping zone, supply zone, observation zone. It sounds formal, but it helps mentally organize the space and makes you more efficient. Plus, if you have to evacuate quickly, you know exactly where everything is. And here's my favorite paranoid touch. Always have a secondary exit planned. Even if it's just a weak section of wall, you know you could break through in an emergency. Have an escape route. I call it the "oh no, everything's gone wrong" door. Hopefully, you never use it, but knowing it's there helps you sleep at night. One last thing. Make the space comfortable, but stay alert. Arrange your sleeping area so you can see the main entrance. Keep supplies organized but accessible. And maybe, just maybe, talk to the shelter occasionally. Does this work? Probably not. Does it make you feel better? Absolutely. Plus, if there are ghosts of previous tenants, best to stay on good terms. I'm not saying they'll help you. So here we are at the end of our underground adventure. You're standing in an abandoned shelter that you've evaluated, inspected, and secured. You haven't been crushed, suffocated, or haunted. As far as post-apocalyptic winds go, that's pretty solid. Let's recap the key survival principles, because, let's be honest, when you're tired and hungry and you've just found shelter, your brain might skip some steps. Principle 1, always evaluate air, stability, and space, in that order. Because if you can't breathe, it doesn't matter how stable the walls are. If the walls aren't stable, it doesn't matter how much space you have. And if there's no space, well, you're not sheltering. You're just hiding in a very uncomfortable hole. Principle 2, improvised barricades add both safety and comfort. They're physical barriers against collapse or intrusion, sure, but they're also psychological barriers. They let your brain believe, even just a little bit, that you're safe. And in a wasteland, belief is sometimes all you've got. Principle 3, fictional observation is critical. By which I mean, imagine everything that could go wrong and then prepare for it. I know, that sounds exhausting and paranoid. But you know what's more exhausting? Getting trapped under rubble because you didn't imagine that the ceiling might have opinions about your presence. Here's the thing about abandoned shelters. They're a gift and a gamble at the same time. They offer protection, rest, and a psychological boost that's hard to quantify. But they also come with risks. Old infrastructure, environmental hazards, and the ever-present question of why exactly the previous occupants left. Always respect the shelter. Treat it like a partnership. You're borrowing this space from the wasteland, and the wasteland has a long memory and a short temper. Don't damage what doesn't need to be damaged. Don't ignore warning signs because you're tired. And for the love of all that's still standing, don't get comfortable to the point of complacency. I've stayed in probably dozens of shelters over the years. Some were incredible, little underground palaces that kept me safe through storms and worse. Others were barely functional holes that I evacuated from in the middle of the night because something went very wrong. The difference between the two, usually just proper evaluation. And here's my final piece of advice. Delivered with all the hard-earned wisdom of someone who has made every mistake possible, if it doesn't collapse, congratulations. You did your homework, trusted your instincts, and got lucky in equal measure. That's a win. If it does collapse, and you get out safely, congratulations anyway. You learned something valuable. You survived, and you've got a great story for the next wasteland wanderer you meet. Because at the end of the day, survival isn't about finding the perfect shelter. It's about learning to evaluate, adapt, and keep moving forward, one underground bunker at a time. Stay safe out there, wanderers. Check your ceilings, trust your nose, and may your shelters always have more structural integrity than the civilization that left them behind.